share thrives on feedback, and we'll try to answer, get everybody know the questions. Anyhow, as I said, we're starting with Megillat Rus, probably the one of the most important seifers that we're going to learn as we get closer and closer to actually reaching David HaMelech. And I think this is probably on the way to trip from Yehuda to David HaMelech. This is probably the most important sefer that we can learn. Okay? And as we learn, I'm not going to learn this with you to get all the ins and outs of Sefer Rus. I did that about four years ago. But we want to focus particularly on two issues. Okay, we're looking towards Malchut Beis David, and the overriding question, not to answer right now, but to think about as we thought. We better close the door. Thanks. As we go through the shiurim, is to ask yourself and to see if we can come up with a conclusion at the end of the shiurim as to why, for all the people in the world, okay, why would a woman coming out of Moab, who will see also very much like her ancestors Tamar and the daughters of Lot, acts very, very boldly sexually. Why would she merit being the Aim Shel Malchus, being the mother of King David, the mother of royalty? So that's question number one that we're going to want to try to get to. And on the male side of things, why Boaz, of all people? What characteristics does Boaz have that will make him the great-grandfather of David HaMelech? Of all the people, special people in Shevet Yehuda, and we've covered a number of them. Why was the line of Boaz chosen to be the father of great-grandfather of David HaMelech? And that's what the thrust of this year is going to be about. All right. Also, as we go along, I see this as a complete linkage between what I didn't learn with you. I learned that a couple of years ago. I learned with you the whole story of Lot and his daughters. We did spend considerable amount learning about Tamar and Yehuda. And there are many, many, many similarities in this story of Rus. We just have to uncover them, which will link all the stories together, okay, and ultimately culminate in David HaMelech. All right. If you take a look in your handouts, from time to time, I'd like you to get familiar with. I put out a genealogy sheet linking both Moab and now you scroll all the way back to Terach. Right. So, as we learn through the story of Rus, we'll be referring to this. It'll be here for you to look at frequently so you can get a better flavor of what's happening, right? So without further ado, let me throw out who wrote Sefer Rus? Who wrote the Megillah of Rus? Anybody? Who wrote Megillat Rus? Who? David HaMelech. No, David was busy writing Tehillim and fighting wars, making love to a lot of women. So he didn't have time to that. Who wrote Sefer Rus? Come on.
Was it Shmuel?
Huh? Prophet Shmuel. Shmuel wrote Rus.
Okay.
We just said yes, Shmuel. Shmuel wrote Rus. Why did he feel compelled to write this Sefer? Okay, so that's another question we'll come to try and figure out as we go along through the share. Why did Shmuel, particularly years later, 4 generations later, 3-4 generations later, why did he feel compelled to write down the whole story of Rus? Okay. Okay, very, very interesting. One of the handouts I gave you, we have to know the background. A good deal of the story is going to take place in Moab, and we're going to be talking about Rus, who came from Moab. You should know there's a Torah prohibition. Lo yavo amoni yikal Hashem adolam, right? A Moab, person from Moab, is prohibited from being accepted into the Jewish people adolam. Okay, if you take a look at your handouts,
Is
it's
that,
given a
is that-
reason.
is that people or
Al
just
Debar.
men? Isn't
Is
that
there a
just,
question?
isn't that just
Turner?
men? Just men?
Just men. Okay, that's the key to the whole story.
Just men.
Okay? But I'm just reading you what's in the Torah right now. All right, the Torah prohibition. Mosid rosh lo mosam v'tovosam adolam. Not only are they not permitted to become Jews, one is prohibited from having any dealings with them. Mosid rosh lo mosam v'tovosam adolam. Okay, if you take a look at your handouts, it's number 2 in the back. Why al dabara shelo kidmu eschem balechem v'mayim baderech b'tzeisem in Mitzrayim, because when Jews left Mitzrayim, they didn't have any food. They approached Moab, and Moab said, "Sorry, our stores are closed, our tzedakah is closed, our humanity towards suffering people is non-existent." Basher sochar alecha et bilam ben biyom b'savor arayim lahal kaloleka. Okay? And not only did they seek not to feed us, but they sought through Bilam to destroy us. So there's a prohibition of having pretty much any relationships at all with Moab. Now let's start the story of Rus. The story takes place approximately in the year 973 BCE. Our calendar, Jewish calendar, 2787 is when it takes place. It's midway between the period of Yehoshua and David HaMelech, all right? Although there is a machlokus exactly when this story took place. The judge at the time is a person by the name of Ibtzan. Ibtzan is also Boaz.
Is this the beginning of the show?
Midway. And remember last week we learned about the first shofet was Osniel, right? Okay. All right. Just a little word, I think that Ada like Boaz, Gematria is 85, Beis Vav in Zion, Sefer Rus has 85 Sukkim. Just so, okay, all right. Why does the Torah hide the fact that Boaz is Ibtzan, never mentions the word Ibtzan? We'll see, because the period of time that he served, the people were so corrupted, so it was hard to give him a little covet and to hide the fact that society around him was so corrupted. All right, they used the word Ibtzan. So let's start now. Vayehi, the famous words, Vayehi b'mei shepot hashoftim. It was in the time that the judges judged the judges. And judged the judges. Vayirav Boros. There's a double Vayehi. We know when you start a pasuk with Vayehi, generally it means that it's going to be bad things, not going to happen. Here we have a pasuk now with a double Vayehi. So there was a double whammy that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent on Bnei Yisrael, right? The judges were not of a high quality at that time. He makes Shpot HaShoftim, that the judges judged the judges. People were not satisfied with their leadership and judged them terribly. In other words, very, very much like we say today, with our leaders, not to make any political statements, but there's a lot of hypocrisy going on. The leadership will tell you not to do one thing, but they'll be caught doing it. That's what the period of Shpot HaShoftim was. I didn't say anything controversial yet, Bob, but go ahead.
Just a quick, I wanted to, the truck on by
No, not that I know of. Okay, if there is, I don't know. Okay, so there was a double whammy. B'nai Yisrael, go ahead. So why doesn't it say Vayhi Bimesh Hashoftim? Well, that's the reason why Chazal jump on that. What's the double lashon? Vayhi Bimesh Shafot Hashoftim. It was on the days that the judges judged the judges. Ada, please. All right. I'm not making this stuff up. Please. Okay. Okay. So there was a double whammy that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent on Bnei Yisrael. Number one was, the reason was because we know if there be shofet, we set the pattern last week, Bnei Yisrael would turn to about the Zorah, they would slide back, they would have some sort of difficulty in their society. So here Hashem sent two punishments. 4 leaders, Shvot HaShoftim, on top of a raw, top of a hunger, a famine. Vayelech ish mi beis lachem, a single person went from beis lachem and ish, Yehuda lagur b'stei Moav, hu v'yishto shtei banav. Right? Torah introduces us to one person. We'll find out his name is Elimelech. Okay, Elimelech at that point was one of the judges. He was one of the leaders of Bnei Yisrael. Came from Yehuda, and he was the richest man in Beis Lechem. Richest man in Beis Lechem, which is one of the reasons why we'll find out he leaves. Okay. It's also called an ish because of all the people who were suffering. Only he decided to pick himself up with his family and leave. The rest of the people stayed. Right? So we know where this is going. Yehuda has a ability. He was blessed by Yaakov to be a leader. Correct? We're talking about Yehuda leadership. And here's a man who was the leader of his generation. He was the richest person in the town. He had some obligation to provide some sort of a leadership. People looked to him for leadership. A, because he's from Yehuda. B, because he was the richest man in the town. And he packed himself up and says, this leadership now in times of crisis is not for me. Is a question coming up? I thought I heard a question. This leadership is not for me. He abdicated his leadership responsibilities. Very, very much unlike Shevet Yehuda. Shemosh Elimelech. Man's name was Elimelech. Elimelech is, of course, Chazal say, it's a play on words. Before the famine, Elimelech had some pretensions towards being king. Elimelech, Eli, Meluchat. To me, the kingship will be deferred, okay? B'Shem Ishto Naomi, right? Very famous name, Naomi, and sweetness. B'Shem Shnei Banav, Machlon V'Chilyon. He has 2 sons. Ephratim, not that they came from Shevet Ephraim. Ephratim means they were noblemen. They were top leadership. Beis Lechem Yehuda v'Yavo Shnei Moav v'Yusham. Of all the places to go, why did they go? Chazal want to know why did Elimelech leave? Why did he abandon his people? So, He was. So Chazal give us a number of reasons. Number one, he was afraid to assume the leadership, even in spite of his name. But number 2, and probably really will resonate throughout the whole story, he was a cheap guy. He realized that people would come to him as the richest man. Tzedakah was a famine to be fed. And he didn't want to spend any of his money on them. Okay? He didn't want to be a man that would sustain the people. Not only that, he was also the largest employer in the town. He had most of the fields, a good deal of fields. So by his leaving, he threw people out of work, right?
What kind of name is Malchut material? Sickness and annihilation.
Okay, so Chazal, I don't want to talk about, but it's exactly what Shabtai said. Very, very strange names to call people. Machlo, Chilyon, annihilation. Okay, probably maybe Mommy knew something about what was going to happen to Ruach HaKodesh, but yes, they're very, very strange names. All right. Elimelech is one. Not only that, he had yichus. Remember, we spent time talking about Nachshon ben Aminadab. So Elimelech was one of the four sons of Nachshon. Okay, one of the four sons of Nachshon. So he said, you should say to yourself, he should have known better. Should have known better. All right. Given his importance, this is an act of rishus to learn that in response to a famine, he leaves Eretz Yisrael, travels across the Jordan River to Moab, which at the time is Israel's enemy. Okay. Not only that, of all places, he goes to Moab. It's time of a famine. Moab was the ones that didn't want to feed people during the time of a famine. That's why we're not allowed to interact with them. So there's no food in Eretz Yisrael. What does he think he's going to get in Moab? He thinks Moab is going to feed him? Okay. All right. Chazal say that Elimelech had enough resources to weather the famine, right? What would motivate him to uproot his family and abandon his land holdings? Okay. So pure, plain Pashut. He was not the best type of person that you'd want to meet, right? Let's continue. One of the reasons why Elimelech also may have left is he realized there was a time also when the leaders weren't being respected. Him. So he wasn't given the respect due to him as the richest man in town. So he might have gotten broigus on the shul, Gabbai quits. People don't pay any respect to him, right? All right. Question to ask, to think about. I don't know that I have a decent answer to it, but just stop to think about it for a while. Why didn't Naomi, who was at Tzedekis, why didn't she stop him? What was her role in all of her husband getting up and going? Just as a sidebar to think about. She was in a minority. All right. Okay. So, Vayomas Elimelech ish Naomi, Elimelech dies, right? Bati shoer he ushnei bonel. She slept alone with Machlon and Chilyon. Okay. It's ironic. The land that they ran to run away from famine, to maybe save them, is again going to be the land that they're going to die in anyhow, right? They're all going to die in Moab. Okay. The Medrash explains that Elimelech's death is a punishment for his behavior, right? Because he lacked a charitable heart, because he failed to act benevolently and generously to his people. He as a leader failed to lead. He failed to pray for his generation. He was punished for leaving Eretz Yisrael. He was punished for permanently settling in Moab by Yagar Sham. He didn't go just to spend a little time to wait out the famine. He left Eretz Yisrael permanently, right? Not only that, he went to a country which had the characteristics that were exactly the opposite of what his country, his Eretz Yisrael is for, right? Machlon and Chilyon also die, right? Why do they die? Right. So, question. Let me ask you before we get into that. After Elimelech dies, why doesn't Naomi pick herself up and go back to Eretz Yisrael? Huh?
Marty?
No. But her husband died. Why didn't mommy go back home?
Maybe her
Marty.
sons refused. The
I
men
don't
had
have a
more
good
power.
answer. Robert?
Yeah, when you taught this class last time, you raised a question about whether their conversion was sincere. And
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to talk later on in the share. Thank you for remembering, Bob, that I did give the share 4 years ago.
We have our
There will be a
notes.
lengthy discussion on the conversion process and whether Rus and Orpah converted when they got married. I'll do that, I promise you, later in the share. Robert?
It's very cleanly. Naomi was a deserter. I don't
yeah,
think
keep your notes.
she was open arms, even though her husband was not, born. So I think that's when they obviously.
So Bob Romberg is trying to answer the question why Naomi didn't go back. And he suggests that she was embarrassed because she was seen as a deserter. She left. And she did not feel comfortable that people would welcome her back with open arms. All right, possibility. All right, Cherna, you had your hand up for a question?
No, not a question. I think at that time, the women just didn't have the power. They did what the man said. The man was the head. He said, go to Moab. She went to, maybe her sons didn't want to leave.
Okay, so though Cherna is also raising the question, raising the solution that women were not empowered in those days. And if the husband picked himself up and went with the children, the woman had really no choice. She had to go and she had to follow. Okay. Those are all, I'll accept all of those. So by Yisrael Lahem Noshim, the two of them, Machlon and Chilion, marry. Moabiyot, they marry Moabite women. Shemo Achas Orpah, V'Shem Hashenis Rus. Vayeshu Som Ki Eser Shonim. 10 years passed. They were married, 10 years passed. Orpah and Rus are sisters. You can look at the genealogy chart. You can see they were related to Eglon. Eglon was the king of Moab. So that these were not common women. These were princesses that they married. All right? Machlon and Chilion in the next pasuk will also be punished for this, plus some of other sins for marrying Moabite women. Question to throw out now to discuss: were they permitted at this point to marry women from Moab? Were they permitted at the point that Machlon and Chilion married Moabite women? Were they permitted to do so? We know long term, like I said earlier, that the prohibition of marrying into Moab extended only to males,
It wasn't
Not the-
obvious, Sharon.
right? But at this point, that halacha, remember we spoke about the time of Yoshua last week, where 500 halachas or so were forgotten. The halacha as to whether one could marry into Moab, female, and what that pasuk meant, was one of the halachas that was forgotten. And it was felt by Klal Yisrael that it applied both to male and to female. So when Machlon and Chilion ultimately, later on, when Shmuel and Osniel revealed the halacha, and Boaz, when they revealed the halacha, they would have been permitted to do what they did. At the time they married, the consensus amongst Bnei Yisrael was that they were not permitted, so that they knew what they were doing in terms of violating the halacha, as it was understood at that point, right? They didn't care, all right, and they married, all right. By Yisu Lohem, what's this word Lohem? By Yisu Lohem, it could have said by Yisu Noshim Moabios. Lohem seems to be superfluous. So Chazal want to say that Naomi, the mother, wasn't in favor of this marriage, all right? They did this on their own, okay? What's the matter, Ada? You don't like that? Huh? As I say to you every week, to 120 years, when we're up in Shemayim, we meet people who made up the Chazal. We will ask them how they came across Torah Shabbat Peh, where they got all of this from. All right? All right.
For themselves. They did it first. Not checking with anyone.
Right.
They took themselves what?
They were their own person.
They took themselves what?
Okay. Time stretches on. They were there 10 years. Machlon and Chilyon at this point, no intentions of going back. They were totally assimilated. They were into the society, right? And yet Mama is still staying there. Okay. Vayamusu gam shnehem machlon v'chilyon, because they were evil. Chazal again say that what happened over the 10-year period, Hashem slowly but surely wiped out their fortune, a little bit each year, hopefully that they would get the message that they were being punished for doing something wrong, not going back to Eretz Yisrael. They still had some wealth. They could have taken it back to Eretz Yisrael to feed the people. But slowly and surely, over a 10-year period, a little bit more each year, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wipes out all their wealth, all their possessions. Okay. And Naomi has now lost everything. Okay. She's bankrupt, impoverished. Okay. Right. So I'll ask the question again after the death of her husband. Naomi saw what the children were doing. Why didn't she go back to Eretz Yisrael? She's now lost everything. She's lost her husband. She's lost her 2 sons. She has no way of becoming a grandmother. So for all intents and purposes, Elimelech and his generation is wiped out. Machlon and Chilyon died childless. Right? Her status in Eretz Yisrael is wiped out. She doesn't have any status anymore. Her youth is gone. As Turner said, the man protected them. Males protected females in those days. A source of protection is gone. Okay. Perhaps I want to raise the question here, the possibility that this was Naomi's punishment for buying into, as severe as it sounds,
Yeah.
maybe this was her punishment for going ahead with Elimelech's plan.
Yep.
Right? She was left alive, but she has nothing. She has no safety net in Moab. She has no safety net anywhere. Okay. So Rita is making the point that, as Cherna did, she really had no choice. She had to go with her husband. She had to go with the children. She had to just be with them. All right. But Naomi ultimately gets it. She realizes at this point, according to Chazal, that her predicament was a punishment from HaKadosh Baruch Hu for staying in Moab all this time. But Chazal say immediately after getting up of Shiva. The Shiva, as soon as the Shiva is over for Machlon and Chilyon, it's a little bit of a machlokus if they died at the same time. They died a little bit after each other. It's not important to our story, but so she and her daughter-in-laws, Rus and Orpah, get up from Shiva, but Toshav b'stei Moab. Okay, the word Batoshav is filled with another word, tshuva. Okay, this is the start of Naomi's tshuva process. They go and they leave to stay Moab. Kishamah, because they had heard from various travelers, caravans that go through, business people go through. Kishama b'smei Moab, ki prakad Hashem es amo lo seis lohem lochem. That things were getting better in Eretz Yisrael. The famine was ending, and that they had a chance for some sustenance in Eretz Yisrael. Okay. She goes out from the place that she was, which is also filled with a double meaning. She wants to change her position in life. That's the makom she wants to change. not only her physical place of residence, but her spiritual place where she was residing spiritually. Asher Hoysa Shoma. Ushtecha lo sel imo, vatelachna baderech lo shuv el Eretz Yehuda. And they get out on the road immediately. Chazal say that the burning desire of Naomi to do tshuva was so immense that she just picked herself up, didn't plan properly for the journey. Okay, it was also a problem that the people of Moab would see that these two princes, Rus and Orpah, are going with her, that they would probably maybe prevent them from leaving, because after all, these were the daughters of the king. So for them to pick themselves up to go to Moab might have caused some problems. So that they left, Chazal say, in the middle of the night, as soon as she could. She didn't plan for the voyage. I have in your handouts a map to indicate what the journey from Moab to Eretz Yisrael to Bethlehem implied. Now remember, on those days there were no super highways. There was not a Motel 6 along the road. There were no rest stations. There were no places to grab a bite, in gas stations. Okay, to set out on a journey, 3 women alone, unprotected by males, through a desert. Okay, without a change of clothing, without a change of shoes, without any means of transportation. The burning desire to get to Eretz Yisrael must have been such that I can only imagine the Yisurim that they went through on the trip. And it certainly would have been very, very easy for some of them during the course of the trip to say, what the heck did I get myself into? I'm going back to Moab.
Oh, wow.
But yet, okay, the godless, and even of Orpah at this point, and we'll know how this turned out badly with her, but the godless of Naomi was that in spite of all the difficulties that this trip entailed at that particular point in time, put yourself in her place. Okay? It was a very, very difficult trip to take. And she persisted in it. Okay. Okay, so Rita said because she had a Jewish neshama, she couldn't stay, but Rus did not have a Jewish neshama. But wait. Okay, so, and again, it took a lot. The tshuva had to be very, very sincere for her to embark upon this. We're not talking about an easy thing. That's what Teitzim and Mokom Shoma. That's what the pasuk is referring to. It was not just she picked up and she left, but Teitzim and Hamokom, she left spiritually, Moab, and all that it entailed. She left the whole position in life. Question I have to ask you, okay? Chazal say that the trip from Moab, to stay Moab, till I got to the border of Eretz Yisrael, with the whole conversation between Rus, Naomi, and Orpah going to take place. What did, other than foraging for food and talking about, how they should travel, what did they talk about during this 2-week period? What do you think was the conversation between the two of them? Huh? So other than physical needs, okay, was there anything else that went on?
Conversion.
What's
Bob
gonna
is
happen?
correct. Naomi used this period of time, this 2-week period of time, because she saw that the daughters, what's the halacha with the ger? What are we supposed to do if somebody who wants to convert? We dissuade them, we do not encourage them. Religion
Turn
doesn't
them down.
encourage them. As a matter of fact, we have to turn them
Turn them down.
away
Right, 3 times.
3 times. And we'll see how Naomi does that from the text 3 times. But before we turn somebody away, somebody has to learn about what the religion is all about, right? Nobody can walk in and just say, I want to be convert, because, Jews are wealthy people. You can't say that, Jews are smart people. Yes,
But
okay.
isn't it
So-
Keneged Halacha if you haven't converted to keep Shabbos or keep mitzvahs?
That's a question, Sarah. Sarah's question is, what does a ger have to do in the run-up to converting? Are there any halachas that they have to do? I'm not a rabbi. I haven't gone through the process. The top of my head, the answer is until you convert completely, you're not required to do shomer mitzvot. You're not allowed. Sam says, I want to say you're not required. Sarah, I don't. You get no schus for doing it. Okay.
Not allowed to observe
I'm not a
Shabbos.
rabbi, Sarah. I think that's the answer, but don't take what I said to you to the bank.
You're not allowed to observe Shabbos.
Robert says you're not allowed to observe Shabbos. I have it from authority that Zelo Nachon that this is not right, Robert, but whatever. Apparently, halacha is, I don't want to say halacha is, I don't know, right? We're in a field that I'm not familiar with, but you don't earn rewards for performing certain mitzvot if you're not Jewish, okay? So keeping Shabbos, Sato Hashem L'Goye or Ratzos. You say it every day. Shabbos in Shmona Esrei. Shabbos was not given to Goyim. Okay, I want to go with it. I don't know exactly what the answer is. Somebody should consult a qualified Rav, okay? I'm only here to teach you about Ravs. I don't know the answer to that, okay? Certainly it has to be, you can't walk right into the religion. There has to be some practice, but, okay. The question is, do you earn schar for it? What happens to if you practice keeping Shabbos and then at the end you decide I don't want to convert? Yeah, but what happens to all those? Do you get mitzvot for credits for doing what that? All right, let's leave it aside. We're going off the derech here. Carla, did you have a question? No. Okay. All right. So Chazal say they spent these 2-week period where Ruth was indoctrinating and learning with Arpa. With Naomi was learning with Arpa and learning with Ruth just exactly the halachas. But telachno baderech, telachno is a play on word of halacha, right? Telachno baderech, they went. Ruth was teaching them the beauties of Yiddishkeit and what it entailed to be a Jew. That's what the 2-week period was, so that ultimately, if in fact, Naomi is not sure why her daughter-in-laws are going with her. Are they going with her out of pity, out of they want to keep her safe, okay? Or are they going to her because they really want to become Jewish? Naomi is not sure in her mind. So Naomi has to find out, exactly, and one of the ways she's finding out is by teaching them halachas. You want to say something, Rita?
But it's more than that. The treasury shows she's spending giving you anything, nothing. You belong to this place. It's a chesed. A woman,
Okay. So Rita is saying that this is chesed. Okay. All right. So, yeah, Bella.
Is there any significance to the fact that for 10 years she did right to become Jewish, and now, the sons of God, and now she wants to become Jewish?
So the question is there any significance to the fact that she waited 10 years to make them Jewish? Okay, but that's the tshuva. That is exactly the tshuva. There is a machlokas as to just exactly, Robert, since now is the time, since Robert brought it up, now is the time, I guess, to talk about it. I was going to talk about it a little bit later. When they were married, Machlon and Chilion, did they convert at that time 10 years earlier? Okay, right? From the text, it doesn't seem like that, but the Chazal is a little bit troubled by this. Would Elimelech really allow, and Naomi, would Elimelech and Naomi really allow their children to marry? Huh? Okay, so Shabtai says they abandoned everything else. Okay. the preponderance of Chazal say that even if they did convert, it wasn't or it couldn't have been a proper conversion. Why could it not have been a proper conversion? Exactly correct. There was no Beis Din there in Moab.
Right, they
So
were in
who
Moab.
was the, huh?
I said they were in Moab.
Right, they were in Moab at the time. So who was there really to convert them properly? Right? And then there was always the question, a very, very popular reason today, unfortunately, for conversion is a non-Jewish girl falls in love with a Jewish boy. And it seems better if she converts because, she wants to marry him. Okay? So Chazal is not sure what was the purpose of Rus and Orpah marrying Machlon and Chilion. Did they really want to convert if in fact it took place? Or was the conversion just something to ease them into the whole marriage situation? So Chazal are very, very, most of Chazal say that if in fact the conversion did take place, and they are not sure, okay, certainly the conversion was not a proper conversion. So now we can understand a little bit better why Rus, Naomi, and Orpah engaged in this conversation. Okay, Naomi felt that probably or possibly that the conversion, if in fact they were converted, the conversion would not be recognized when she got to Eretz Israel, and it wasn't proper, so she had to do a conversion according to halacha. Okay. Right. Okay. So that's going to be a good question that I had. If in fact, okay, Naomi was the one who did the conversion. Okay, where was the Beis Din ultimately to do it? So we're going to have to figure that out. All right. It's a good question. Okay. Any other questions? Because I want to move on. All right. Okay. So I want to stop here right now. Okay. I asked a question about Rus, Boaz, and Naomi, why these people should be the major link to David HaMelech. Sefer Rus has a very, very common nickname among Chazal. It's called Sefer HaChesed. It's called Sefer HaChesed. Okay. Up until this point, when Machlon and Chilion died, I asked you to identify a single act of chesed in the narrative. Could you give me a single act of chesed in the narrative? Possibly you might want to say that Rus and Orpah do get some credits because they did kfura for their husbands, okay? Possibly that might be the only act of chesed until now. The moving out of Moab changes the whole theme of Sefer Rus. It changes it into one of chesed, and the entire Sefer for the rest of the way is going to be one act of chesed after another. What I did before the shir, I spoke to Rita before the shir. I gave Rita a blank piece of paper, and on this piece of paper, every time we learn now something that happens in Sefer Rus, whether it belongs to Naomi, whether it belongs to Rus, or whether it belongs to Boaz, she is given the job to jot down the type of chesed that's been performed. I guess when we finish, Rita, maybe at the end of each sentence, lecture, Rita can give us all the chesed that she marked down. Go ahead. Okay, that's not the first one. I guess the first act of chesed that you want to put down is how these three, A, that the women left with her, and B, I just told you they spent 2 weeks running through the desert without clothes, without food, without protection from males, without protection from, any things, bandits that's going to be, and they clung to each other. So the first chesed, plenty of chesed must have been done. So the chesed you have to put down for Rus and Naomi certainly is they took care of each other on this particular trip. They looked out for each other, they fed each other, they washed each other, they foraged for food, whatever they had to do to keep alive, each one kept the other one alive. right? Wasn't a small thing, all right? Okay. So Rita is now going to chart all the chesed, right? All right, so let's go. Hey. Here's number one on the three rejections of doing tshuva. She spent now 2 weeks. She's taught them all the halachas. She taught them all the halachas involved in becoming a Jew. Okay? Return. I'm up to sentence 8, Sam. Return, return, return. Go back. Okay, she's pushing him away. Go back to your mother's house. Yas Hashem imochem chesed. God will do chesed with you. Kasher imam mesim be'imodi. Okay, like you did chesed for me, you buried Machlon and Chilyon. Okay, so you deserve points for that. And for the 2 weeks that we spent traveling in the desert together, we kept each other alive. You did a lot of chesed. Okay. Imodi, okay? I'll give you a little thing on Imodi, right? Okay? Who's going to come out from Rus? Ayin, Oved, Mem, Mashiach, Dalid, David, Yud, Yishai. You got it all right? Okay. Carla likes that. The end of Pasuk 8. Hesed imamesim v'imodi. Somehow Chazal say she had a level returning back to Eretz Yisrael. She was imbued with a higher ruach. I don't want to say ruach hakodesh because Yishai's going to jump on me, right? Shabtai is going to jump on me for saying that ruach hakodesh, right? Ruach hakodesh, but maybe it was taken away from her. She lost it there in Moab. She's getting it back.
Why was he so worried that Ruach HaKodesh?
Huh?
Why was he so worried that?
What was she?
Yeah.
She wasn't worried. Maybe HaKadosh Baruch will be worthy.
Yeah.
Because she's coming back to Eretz Yisrael. They say when somebody is doing tshuva, nobody should stand in there. Nobody can approach them and stand in their shoes. Okay. Number 9. Sentence number 9. Yitein Hashem lochem
Marty,
menucha.
Why does they say go back to your mother's house? Why does she turn east to mother's house? Why not to father's house?
Because probably the father was upset with them. The mother generally has more rachmanis on children that go off the derech. As far as if Moab, society in Moab was concerned, right? Eglon is a king, right? And we could imagine how he must have felt when he's embarrassed or whatever it is. He's probably going to take it out on his children, right? Mother, they say, generally has more rachmanis on the children. All right.
I think also the mother didn't know the mother.
Huh?
The father in Moab, they didn't know the father was the father.
All right. Rita says people know who their mother are. They don't know the father. I'll reject that, but okay. Yiten Hashem lochem, God, menucha, mutzena menucha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give you menucha, Beis Shah, in the house of a husband. She's saying to them, go back, get yourself married, go on with your lives, right? Vatishak lohen, vatisena kolon, vativkeno. She kissed them, and they cried. Okay? All right. Chesed, would you do this as a chesed? All right. Then it's lechna, shovna. Why the double language? 2 people. One means she's saying lechna, and the other is the one she was shovna. So which one was she saying lechna to, and which one was she saying shovna to? So the lechna, go back to your country. She was speaking to both of them at the same time. And shovna, go back to your religion. Lechna, shovna, go back to your country, go back to your way of life. And not only that, shovna, go back to your religion. All right. Anything so far now, and we'll end the share with this. Anything so far, Bella? Yeah, go ahead. Because Naomi is not sure at this point. Why are they going with her to Eretz Yisrael? If you're Naomi, in your mind, why are these two young princesses from Moab going with me? Right? They love her. Do they love her and that's the end of it? Or is it more than love? So Naomi in her mind has to figure out if she's going to go back to Eretz Yisrael with the two of them, what is if they don't convert, okay, and they're just accompanying her out of pity or out of sorrow, how will these two women from Moab be not only but accepted in Eretz Yisrael? So she has to say, okay, that possibly they have to be converted. That's the only way they're going to be accepted there. And if they love me, right, are they going with me just because they feel sorry for me? And that's not a reason to go back. She's freeing them. So she's testing them. She's testing them. Why exactly are you going with me? And you'll see in the end she was correct. Orpah goes back and Ruth goes with her.
Marty, this is Sarah, but is it really a kindness and a chesed for Ruth to send Orpha back by herself?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yes. All right. Bob.
But the contract is, why would you take them away from Moab, where they're home, and send them back to Moab? It would seem that that's.
So again, she didn't take them away. They voluntarily went with her. And she's confused now, Naomi. Why did they go with her? What did they have to gain? Their father was a king. They were princesses. What did they have to gain? So she's mixed up in her thoughts. Are they going with me because they feel sorry for me out of pity? Do they love me out of pity? Or do they really love me? Or does that extend also to everything that I do, my religion?
And they were daughters in this household.
Right.
They knew nothing about halacha. That they knew nothing about Torah.
Okay.
All right. And we have in the Torah that was true, that they're learning all this stuff now.
Then why were Machlon and Chilion killed? Let me ask you a question. So what did they see? Machlon and Chilion put on talis and tefillin every day, went to shul.
No.
They got kosher food. They went to kosher bakeries.
No. They were
What?
on the other hand,
Yeah.
does it say that they totally took with the Moabite society?
So let me ask the question this way, okay? Yes, they saw something in Naomi's house. Were they converted properly? Or were they converted, or were they doing what they were doing only because they had Jewish husbands? And again, maybe Naomi's not sure. Okay? So that's why she has to spend 2 weeks on the road.
And part of their sins is that the parents allowed this into their offspring. And the line was ending because how was who's a Jew determined
Right.
by her mother. And these mothers were not properly going to be the mothers of another generation of Jews, and they threw this away.
Okay, good. And Bob?
And by the way, I think I read the 10-year period with two children to divorce their wives, out of whatever. It could be that their sin was, I read this somewhere, the sin was they didn't have children in that 10-year period. That's
Okay, again, I don't know. I don't know the full wealth of Torah that's involved. If you read it, you read it. Okay, I would say maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't want them to have children, right? There's a later statement which we're going to learn later on, when Naomi says, "Ani Malaya halachti," I left, what we call Bethlehem, full. So Chazal say she was pregnant at the time she left. It started a 10-year period with another child, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu punished her he took away, she aborted the pregnancy. She couldn't hold the pregnancy because she left Eretz Yisrael. So, okay. So I just want to, I have this down just, do we see any similarities here between the story of Yehuda and Tamar and so far Rus, Naomi? Do we see any similarities? If I ask you, you're taking a test, and the teacher asks you, point out similarities, because I told you all these stories are connected. So Yehuda has 2 sons who died childless, right? Naomi has 2 sons who died childless. Yehuda says to Tamar, Shmi almona beis avich, leave me, okay? Naomi says, Lech no shovno, right? Yehuda saw Tamar as the source of her son's death and seeks to banish her. Naomi, according to some Chazal, see Ruth and Orpah as the source of her son's death and seeks to banish them. Okay? Yehuda runs from Eretz Canaan, and Naomi runs from Eretz Yisrael. Right? So these are some of the linkages that are starting to take place in the 2 stories. Okay. All right. It's 11 o'clock. Okay. I'll collect the handouts or we keep them for next week. If
Marty?
you want. Yes, Robert.
Before you were going over the Ayin Mem Daled Yud, what was the Ayin for?
Ayin for Ayin for Oved. Oved is the first child that Rus is going to have from Boaz. Oved. Oved is going to be the grandfather of David.
Obed had the twins?
No. Not that I know of.
You want this?
No, you keep the chesed sheet.
All right, Marty, thank you.
All right. Everybody have a good
I
week.
just have a question of what you just
Question,
said before.
question.
Okay, you said that Hashem aborted the pregnancy of a woman who left Israel. Who was it that Hashem aborted? Which one was it?
Naomi was pregnant. If you take a look,
Naomi. Oh, okay. Okay.
right, when she comes back near the end of chapter 1, she says, Ani Malaya, I left full. All right, because I'll
Okay.
say that pasuk is that she was pregnant.
Pregnant. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Don't you think also that in the beginning, when they still had money, that, Ruth and
meeting or leave meeting.
Orpah thought that, hey, we're marrying into a prominent family. Hey, we're princesses. You know,
Correct.
We're going to,
Yeah.
we're going to have,
All right. Yes. Yeah.
And then, you know, as the time passed, their standard of living gets lower until they were destitute.
Right. Okay, everybody, have a good week. I'll see you next week before Purim, but if I don't see you before Purim, have a freilich